Hello. Welcome, 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 welcome. I am so excited. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Brianna Boyd, and she's going to be sharing with us about how to overcome trauma, PTSD, anxiety disorders as a female entrepreneur and how this can help you thrive. So, this subject is, let me get off Wi Fi. Okay. Are we back? Okay. My Wi-Fi connection makes it kind of weird. Let me say that again. So today we have a very special guest, Dr. Brianna Boyd, and she's going to be sharing with us about how to overcome trauma and anxiety to thrive as a female entrepreneur. So Brianna is amazing because she has over 20 years experience working as a psychologist and therapist. So she's very well versed on this subject, and I see that she's here requesting to join, so I'll let her in. Yeah, we'll get into it. Maybe I'm gonna restart and then. Oh, there we go. Oh, there she is.
Yay!
Yay!
Good. Hi.
Hi,
Hi.
beautiful.
Good to see you this
Hi,
morning,
good to
gorgeous.
see. Oh, so good to see you. You look
Thank
radiant.
you, darling. So do you. It's great to be here. Thanks for
Mm,
having me.
yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
excited.
Me too. Me too. Me
Mm,
too. Me too. It's great to see
mm,
your face, baby.
Great to see you too. Yeah, and I was just gonna say that the subject is so near and dear to my heart, and I know you have decades of experience helping people overcome PTSD and trauma and anxiety disorders.
Hmm.
And I know for me, like, I think all of us have trauma in our lives as humans. Like, I'm gonna generalize and say that, but I dealt with like really, really bad anxiety for a while, and then just like getting familiar with your work and seeing how much that actually takes a toll on all areas of my life, business, relationships, and that there is a solution, which is really exciting, that it is treatable, right? And I think that that's so beautiful. So I'm so excited for you to share your wisdom with us.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'd love to ask, can you tell us a little bit about your background with treating trauma, PTSD, anxiety?
Absolutely. I would love to. I love to talk about anxiety. I love to work with anxiety. I love to work with trauma and talk about trauma for the number one reason that it's just highly impactful. It's highly treatable. Now, that's not to say that every single person will be totally cured, right? But these are disorders or conditions that people can actually resolve in ways that maybe other conditions are not as resolvable. So that's like the first really important plug I want to make here. So cool. I have a very extensive history in treating anxiety disorders. I started treating anxiety disorders specifically, so panic disorder, OCD, generalized anxiety, those types of things in my postdoc. So that was, gosh, 2008, 2008. So I don't know how long ago that was now, 14 years maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so that was when my work got very specialized in that regard. I'd seen patients with like those conditions prior, but getting like really specialty training, hands-on, started there. Working with people who had hoarding conditions also is really interesting work. Then later I worked on a research project at the VA, and we innovated new treatments for returning veterans who had traumatic brain injury plus PTSD. So we took a base PTSD treatment that's very, very heavily researched. It's called cognitive processing therapy. It's an exceptional therapy that's very effective. And we enhanced it with like neurocognitive principles to help people better access that kind of a cognitive heavy treatment. So helping them set reminders to do it, helping them put their notebook in the same place every time so that they're not looking for it going wild, like, where's my stuff? I can't find it. Or just sort of supporting the approach. And so I did that for about 8 years. I got highly, highly specialized in treating PTSD. So those are kind of my background. Also taught at San Diego State for 10 years, taught a stress management class, which is anxiety, right? We get anxious. So some anxiety is really healthy and normal. And when it persists, when it shouldn't, that's when it becomes a problem. So that's kind of, yeah, that's
Mm,
the big deal.
mm, that's beautiful. And I've heard you say that there are actually more women and children in the US with PTSD than all the veterans of all the wars combined. Is that true?
That's correct. There are more women and children in the United States right now living with PTSD from domestic abuse and domestic violence and sexual abuse than there are veterans with PTSD from all the wars combined. Now, it's a massive number when you think about all the veterans with PTSD from all the wars combined. So I want people to really appreciate the magnitude of what that looks like for the rest of us. Also, there's other ways to get PTSD. That's just the most concentrated, the most kind of sort of typical way to get it, honestly, is at home from when you were a kid, or
Mm,
at home from a
mm,
partner, or during a sexual assault. That's like the most common place we contract or catch post-traumatic stress disorder. You can also get it from being in a bad car accident, losing a loved one to suicide, or a tragic murder or death. Um, Assaults, men get assaulted at a higher rate, like physical assault, than women, and women get sexually assaulted at higher rates than men. But both genders, all genders, I should say, not just both, it's not binary, all genders can be harmed in specific ways.
I just want to like take a moment and just feel into the magnitude of that and just
Mm-hmm.
send love to anybody who's watching that relates to that or knows anybody who's experiencing that.
Yeah.
Um, what might somebody experience if they have PTSD or trauma that's unresolved? How might that show up in their life? What symptoms might they experience?
That's a great question. One of the reasons, whenever I do a lecture about stress or anything, I always do a plug for the symptoms of PTSD because, again, it's just more common than we think. And most of us don't associate with having it because we didn't go to war. So I would be thrilled to share the symptoms and kind of signs and what to look for. First and foremost, you need a trauma. That's what separates PTSD from other anxiety disorders, right? Anxiety disorders, one thing they all have in common is that the fight, flight, freeze response gets activated. The why is what sets different anxiety disorders apart from one another, right? So with PTSD specifically, first and foremost, we need a traumatic event to occur. So this could be, what you can imagine, a sexual assault, a physical assault, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, witnessing violence, community violence, um, let's see, car accidents, dog attacks. I've treated people for dog attacks. I mean, it's just like this, you can see something happen on the street and that can be really
Mm,
traumatizing. So this stuff can be more commonplace than we realize. So first you need a trauma, right? Then after the trauma, this is important. About 3 months after a traumatic experience, you're not going to be okay. You're going to be discombobulated. You're going to be out of sorts, and that's normal. So we don't even diagnose PTSD until at least 3 months following a traumatic event, right? But if symptoms persist beyond 3 months, that's when you're looking at PTSD territory. Okay.
mm,
Mm-hmm,
mm,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
mm.
So that's one thing too. Is like, expect to be discombobulated after you have a very, very stressful and or life-threatening experience.
Yeah, fascinating. Now, you mentioned emotional abuse. I
Mm-hmm.
know these are like very sensitive subjects, so I just really want
I
to
know.
acknowledge for the listeners that I know that this conversation might be
Like
heavy, but I
triggering.
think it's a really important conversation to have.
Yeah.
So I just want to give a plug, like if you are triggered, like maybe I don't know,
Take some
you're the
deep breaths.
psychologist.
If you're triggered, take some deep breaths. Put your hand on your heart. Just breathe out the mouth. Let something go. Shrug the shoulders. And you can look around. And you can say, "I'm safe right here, right now." Like, so make sure you are before you tell yourself some bullshit. Look around, and if you're safe, I'm safe right here, right now. One of the things that
Beautiful.
trauma does that's so disruptive, baby, is that it brings us from the here and now and pulls us into the there and then. And so when we start to get
Mm,
triggered from trauma, we're really getting triggered into the there and then. So what's really important is to just immediately ground ourselves in the present moment. looking around, noticing that right now that's not happening and that we're safe in our bodies and our environments. And if you're not safe, I recommend getting to a place where you are. You know, if you're not safe, that's real. So that's why I want people to look around. Just don't assume. Like some people are actually getting triggered because something unsafe is happening right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is it on a psychological level that our mind brings us to the there and then instead of the here and now? Why does that happen?
That's a great question. So with PTSD, we call them actually stuck points. People kind of get stuck. The nervous system is regulates so much. We've got two nervous systems: sympathetic, parasympathetic. I won't get into all the science behind that, but the sympathetic nervous system drives the fight, flight, freeze response, and that's why we're all here. It's a healthy response. Pelicans have it, lizards have it, cats have it, we have it, hippopotamuses have it. The fight, flight, freeze response is older than humans, right? And it's really very invested in learning about what's dangerous. That's what keeps us safe, right? And so it leaves an imprint, like traumatic events and stressful events kind of leave an imprint on the nervous system. That's actually pretty important. And so that's what kind of happens is the nervous system, especially through chronic abuse, through childhood, the nervous system kind of gets set at this point where it's always preparing you. So it's actually just trying to keep you alive and safe. And so it's overactive, trying to prepare you, getting ready. And so it's like, oh, shoot, is that thing? Oh my gosh, is that thing? So let me give you an example from our hunter-gatherer days, if I might, right?
Yeah,
Let's say
please.
I'm going to the watering hole. And I go to the watering hole regularly. And one day I go to the watering hole and there's a big bad bear there. And the big bad bear tries to attack me, right? The next time I go to that watering hole, that's going to be relevant for me. So my brain's going to go, oh, shoot, is that bear here again? That thing that happened last week? Well, that happened this week because this looks the same. So will the bear be there? So that's what's happening. And then also all the things associated with the bear attack will also now serve as a trigger to look out for the bear. So it could be the sound of the river. It could be the smell of the water. It could be the color of, the day and that light and how it reflects, because all of those things then become associated and imprinted with this important and dangerous experience. And so then the body starts to get hypersensitive to those types of cues and pulls us back to the there and then so that we're prepared to fight in the here and now.
Mm. It's so interesting how nature, God, whatever you want to call it, designed us to be like that.
You got
It's,
it.
yeah, especially in, like I've noticed because I've had my own journey with trauma and I'm still continuing to heal and learn more about it. Um, But just like this perpetual state of anxiety, it's almost like the baseline becomes, instead of like the baseline being a safe and regulated space, it's like the baseline becomes a very activated state. Now, how is this going to long term, if people live in this constant state of activation in that sympathetic nervous system, how is that going to affect like their business, their career, their
Oh
relationships?
gosh, in every single way you could imagine. So again, the fight, flight, freeze response is a healthy response. It's like a nitrous we can hit, or a nitro, or whatever you call that in a game, like in a racing game, that thing that gives you
Yeah,
the
yeah,
extra juice, right? That's what it is. So it's helpful, but it's also meant to come and go. It's meant to come, give you the juice, and then wrap it up box. The problem with PTSD is it gets stuck in that nitro position, right? And so that affects everything because all of these systems shift functioning in the moment of a crisis. That's very functional, but outside the moment of a crisis can become debilitating. So I'll give you a couple of examples, right? For one, the fight, flight, freeze response is associated with our ability to concentrate and our ability to generate memories. For example, when the fight, flight, freeze turns on, it galvanizes our attention. Attention is like a spotlight that we can shine on things. And when we shine a spotlight of attention, we can generate a memory, right? So if I shine my spotlight of attention over here, I can now attend to what's over there and then remember what I attended to, right? When there's a traumatic event, our biology automatically pulls our attention to the trauma, which means that that's what I can see and that's what I can remember. People who have their PTSD, who are having fight, flight, freeze turn all the time, it's constantly grabbing their attention, which affects concentration and memory. And then also makes us start to generate more memories of what's dangerous, bad, or wrong. Because I'll go, oh, shoot, is that a problem? Oh, wait, I'm over there. So all the safe things I no longer attend to because they're not important to me. They're not relevant from a biological perspective. And so if I'm trying to sit down and concentrate on building my business and something triggers me, for the next 20 minutes, you're not going to be able to focus on that. That's not
yeah.
available. A
Mm,
really good lived example of this that I share with my patients is like, imagine you're a passenger in a car, right? And you're on your phone, let's say, and your friend is driving and she swerves and slams on the brakes. Where do you look?
straight
You
ahead.
got it. You got it. It's a reflex. You can't even help it. So whatever you were doing, gone. What you're doing now, focusing on danger. And basically, PTSD is the fight, flight, freeze triggering out of control. So it's constantly snagging our attention, concentration. So I work with people, especially, but it was cute when I worked with my vets. They always come in and go, Doc, I can't remember anything. I have the worst memory. And I'd be like, okay, well, tell me about it. They say, well, I'm at dinner with my wife, and she's talking about her work again, and she's talking about her work friends, and I can't remember any of the conversation. And I said, well, what was going on? And they say, well, there was all these people walking in and they looked kind of dangerous. And this one guy, he had a red sweatshirt and red shoes and blue jeans and a red cap. And this other guy had a yellow hat and a red beard. And I'm like, well, it looks like your memory's pretty good. Looks like you can remember things pretty well. It's where your attention is getting pulled that you're generating memories. So that's just one thing I can say about how it affects us in our daily lives as entrepreneurs. I'd like to give one other really important example of how it affects our relationships. Okay. So
Mhm.
when we're in fight, flight, freeze, that's not a relational state. That's not like hey, let's sing kumbaya. It's all good. Let's get down and have some fun here. It's like, what's going on? Am I safe? Let me get out of here. And we might even not even be able to relate to the people we're immediately connected to when our nervous system gets activated that way. So
Mm.
embedded in the fight, flight, freeze response, which is super adaptive, is a lot of hormones that produce this very aggressive reaction. Because if I'm going to fight or run for my life, I best do so aggressively, right? PTSD, the fight, flight, triggering all the time, that makes me very agitated. It makes me very irritable. So we can have very short fuses with the people that we love. We can feel constantly irritated or irritable. So that's another way it can affect our relationships. It also affects sleep. Like if I am in danger, I'm not going to bed tonight. It's not good for me. If I think there's a lion outside the cave, then I'm up. And so not getting good sleep can affect our relationships, our functioning at work, how we show up in the world. Our gastrointestinal system gets affected by this. I mean, it's so systemic. It's so holistically systemic as it's meant to be. This is also a hugely costly response to wage. Like it costs a lot of resources. And so people with PTSD are exhausted. They're fucking exhausted. They're running around like running from a bear kind of everywhere they go. So I love to work with folks. And by the way, this is exactly the same in anxiety. The only difference is the genesis, the origin. So anxiety disorders are also just the fight, flight, freeze response triggering out of control. It's just not locked and loaded. It's not tracked onto a particular traumatic experience. People with panic disorder, it's tracked onto their own somatic experience. People with panic disorder are afraid of their own bodily sensations, and the fear response drives the bodily sensations, which drives the fear response, which drives the bodily sensations. And so all anxiety disorders in one way or another kind of hijack the sympathetic nervous system.
It's interesting that PTSD and anxiety disorders have such similar symptoms, and it's just the origin of like that's the difference.
You got it.
Um, so it's interesting because like I grew up, my dad is a hypnotherapist, so I learned a lot about how like my thoughts influence my feelings and my focus and my attention influence my feelings. Um, but I feel like in my experience for a long time, I had a lot of shame and denial around having really severe anxiety because I think there's like this awakening of people who are getting really into
Excuse
bless you.
me.
There's this awakening of people who are getting really into like yoga and personal development and spiritual healing. And that's great. And I love all of that stuff. And I'm like an avid student of all that stuff. I love me some vinyasa yoga and yin yoga and all that stuff. And like the personal development, like I love it too. Um, but I feel like in my experience, like I've been on my healing journey for 14 years. Like I've been healing since I was like a fucking kid, like for a long ass time, you know, and I still have some trauma that I'm working through and anxiety that I'm working through. And I think that there's there's almost like a disconnect and like a mistrust, I feel, between like this like world of like entrepreneurial, personal development, growth minded people, and then like the real ass fucking real ass psychology behind it of like no, like there's like some shit going on and not always like the self-help book can help you with the trauma. So
Right.
where do you feel like personal development and like that stuff kind of falls in, but versus like the cognitive behavioral processing therapy or like or you mentioned another one that helps
CPT, cognitive
C,
processing.
C,
That's right. Yeah, and then prolonged
CPT.
exposure. Those are both for specifically for PTSD. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what do you feel like is the difference between that and like some of the personal development stuff? Like why do you feel like it's so important for people to actually experience the
Oh, you
CPT
got it. You got it. See,
and the
yeah,
PE?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
good, good,
yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. The really interesting thing about psychotherapy specifically, individual psychotherapy specifically, is that first and foremost, it's research backed. Like it's I these treatments that I utilize, they're tried and true. They were developed in the 90s. They've been studied. They were actually developed on sexual assault survivors and to be used with sexual assault survivors. And they're so effective that then the VA borrowed them for combat veterans, right? So because PTSD is PTSD is PTSD. It doesn't matter where you get it. When you get it, you have it. And so I would say that when we do like personal development and read books and all that and go to retreats, that's wonderful. And I would say it's extremely supplemental, but it does not replace psychotherapy. And here's why. First of all, it's important to work with somebody who's trained. For example, the first step in all trauma treatment is establishing safety. It's not just digging into the trauma. So like if you're not in a safe, stable, foundational, supportive environment, you're not ready to unpack the trauma. And so what I work with people first and foremost is to make sure they're safe. And if they're not safe, to get them to safety. It is real emotional safety, physical safety, psychological safety. For example, if you work at a job and your boss is super abusive, you're not super safe, right? So I might work with somebody to help them get themselves out of that job circumstance before we start digging away. These retreats, these are so wonderful, these courses, but they don't take that into consideration. They bring people in no matter where they are in their journey. They're like, let's dig in. That is not a safe thing to do at all. That is a very dangerous thing. It's very contraindicated. It's not appropriate. Okay. And another thing that's really interesting is this. It is not appropriate to treat trauma survivors at different levels of what's it called? Trauma recovery. Okay. So there's 3 stages of trauma recovery. There's safety, remembrance and mourning, and reconnection. Those are the 3 phases. Okay. Again, I mentioned safety. The second phase is the digging in, the unpacking. And the third phase is like, hey, I'm through that stuff. I want to like get my life back on track. I want to like start looking outward instead of inward. I want to see what's on the horizon. I'm excited about my life. You cannot put these 3 people in a group together. That you must assess. So I don't even like to do any trauma treatment in groups at all. I don't think it's helpful. These people will trigger
Mm.
each other. If you're in the safety phase and you haven't established safety and you're using drugs or alcohol and you're maybe self-harming through cutting or you're dissociating, and the group 2 wants to unpack their trauma about sexual abuse, group 1 is going to go bananas. They're not going to be able to tolerate that kind of exposure because they haven't established safety. So they should not be in a group together. And the safety group will do everything to slow down the remembrance and mourning groups or stop them. But when that happens, the remembrance and mourning group gets traumatized, like they get triggered, like in their original trauma, when nobody would understand them, listen to them, believe them. So it recapitulates that early childhood trauma. And then the reconnection people are like, boring. When is this going to be over? So it's like, and when we do things like retreats and workshops, we don't take any of that into consideration, right? And so it's
Mm.
not a safe place to do that kind of work for a lot of people. Now, that's not to say that people don't get a lot of good out of this, but there's people who I talk to later, like I dissociated through the whole thing. Or like I went home and I drank a fifth of tequila, or I went home and I noticed that I really wanted to cut, or I dissociated. I wasn't even present. I wasn't even in my body. And then they internalize shame. Like, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I get this great healing? There must be something really wrong with me. And they were just in the wrong level of exposure to recovery methods. So that's one really important thing I'll say. I could say a million things, but the second really important thing I'll say is this. The cool thing about PTSD treatment is it's tailored specifically for you. All anxiety disorder treatments are. So OCD will be tailored specifically for you and your concerns. PTSD, what we do is we basically make a treatment, a pill, if you will. It's not a pill, but in theory, just for you, formulated just for you, centering your triggers, centering your ideas. So, and that's why I also think it's not great to treat PTSD in groups. Is like these treatments are then tailor made to exactly support you in your recovery based on where you're at in your recovery phases and what specifically comes up in your mind and your body, which I don't think a lot of other like maybe milieus have. Also, what's important to know is that like it takes a lot of experience. I'll never forget my first trauma session. It was a fucking dumpster fire. It was a hot mess. It takes so much practice and experience to really master these treatments. When I became a really specialized in PTSD, I did 8 years, and a woman would listen to my recordings, and weekly she would go over them with me. She was my consultant. Like I got high level training, yes, and so I'm to a point now where I can not only, if I know what happened to somebody, I would basically know what their ideas would be about themselves and the world, and I would know how to dismantle them. I already have like a whole toolbox ready. Like you tell me what happened, you tell me your thought, I know exactly how to go after it after years of experience and support. So I don't think we see that in like the everyday popular psychology healing spaces that are important. Those things are also great because they might alert you to the problem at all, right? And like give you resources about what to even do about it. But I don't think that those kinds of contexts are the most supportive as it relates to specifically post-traumatic stress disorder and OCD as well.
Mm.
OCD as well. Anxiety, you might get a lot out of it. Phobias and panic, you might get a lot out of it. So like not all anxiety disorders are created equal, but PTSD and OCD, those two will be very difficult to heal in those kinds of contexts.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing about the difference. And one of the things I love so much about you is just like how many years, like many, many years of experience you have doing this. And I think it's really interesting that for 8 years you had somebody listening and giving you feedback on how to do this. And it's interesting because I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs who are coaches, who are, therapists that are maybe a little bit earlier in their career,
Sure.
or like a lot of spiritual healers, yoga instructors. And I think that there's like almost this gap in like my generation, I'm a millennial, of like understanding how much time it really takes to develop these skill sets, And I think I'm wondering if that's even related to a trauma response, like this need to have things fast, and like if that affects our patience. Like, does it affect our ability to be patient and really like see the long-term vision and really commit to something for years?
That's a great question. The funny thing is I'm on the other side of millennials. So I'm like at the very, and so I can understand the utility in all of it. Like I understand the desire for velocity and let's helicopter over this thing. And like traditional institutions in some ways have really let us down. We end up with all this debt and no job prospect. And so I can see, I don't think it's just like a get rich quick thing. I think it's like a this doesn't work thing. Like, so I respect that millennials are like, this is not, I don't want to take that road. Maybe not just because I'm so impatient and immature, but because it doesn't go anywhere. Like it leads to debt and no job. And I don't want to have a
Yeah.
life like that. Right. So, but here's what's cool. If you want to talk about, expeditiousness, PTSD treatments are very short term. Anxiety treatments in general are very short term. But I would say that they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in your craft. It takes 10,000 hours. And so it takes what it takes. Right. And so here's the other thing I'll say. It's all for you. It's not for your patients, it's for you. I'll never forget when I did a PhD, and the first 2 years I got my master's, and then the last 3 years in my program, and I got my PhD. I'll never forget when I graduated with my master's after 2 years, and I thought, oh my God, thank God I'm not being let loose on the public right now. Like, I am not ready at all. People would talk to me in therapy, and I'd be like, shit, what do I say? Like, I don't know what to say. And I'm like, oh, I'm the expert, I have to say something. Like, especially with couples, I'm like, oh. So like, I'm glad I did it for myself because I feel so confident in the therapy room, and that really helps my patients. So it's something I'm offering both of us. But when I show up really grounded and really like, I got this. I got this. And when you have a therapist that shows up in a space like, baby, I've got this. This is not my seventh rodeo. This is not my 700 rodeo. I've probably treated, God, I don't know, maybe 500 patients with PTSD, maybe more. Like, I feel like I've heard it and seen it all. And
Yeah.
so good, and I was good things just take time, dedication, but you don't have to do a traditional route to get there. You don't have to do, you don't have to take these very extensive traditional routes. But they really support you doing it for
Yeah.
yourself. You got it, because it feels good to have confidence. I've come a long way. I've come a long way, and it feels good. And so, really, I did this for myself. My practice is for me, and then
Yeah.
other people get to benefit from it.
It's so beautiful. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Something else I think specifically for female entrepreneurs, and I've experienced this on my journey, when it comes to building a business, there's a lot of in my journey, and I think a lot of our listeners who are entrepreneurs can relate to this, a lot of stuff around safety,
Mm-hmm.
because the money, it's not like a normal job where you're like, I know I show up and I work this amount of hours and I'm going to get this much money. When it
Absolutely.
comes to entrepreneurship, there's a lot of like trying things, and like sometimes things don't work the way you wanted to the first
Mm-hmm.
time, and then you have to like try again, and like it's like meanwhile it's like, well shit, I gotta like pay my rent and like pay my bills, and like there's stuff happening. So I've noticed for me and for a lot of people that I work with, there is stuff around like safety, feeling safe to put yourself out there, having fear of even like showing up and like speaking about like the work that you do on camera. How do you feel like trauma and anxiety kind of correlate and affect those aspects of entrepreneurship?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, um, I think that it shakes our confidence first and foremost. Like, we just feel really not confident. These are base needs, so it is really scary. This is also interesting too. Trauma and anxiety both will affect our ability to be creative, right? To think through loopholes and try to get out of binds. We sort of like get stuck and held up in things, and so our creative mind, our motivation, our interest, all of that gets affected by anxiety and PTSD. Think about it this way, okay? When we are anxious or having a PTSD triggered moment, basically we can do well what crocodiles can do well, because crocodiles basically have like that brain, like that's their major component, right? So, like, can a crocodile write a business plan? Can a crocodile read a money book? you know,
I love this.
if a crocodile can run, it can fight, it can freeze, it can't fawn. So maybe we would say what a bear can do, right? So, like, if you want to do what a bear can do, turn on your fight, flight, freeze response, right? If you want to do what humans can do, you gotta quiet that part. And so we pull into this very ancient part of our brain where nothing that we are trying to do as entrepreneurs resides or is accessible. All of that resides in the frontal lobes, like thinking, concentrating, persevering, positive self-concept, reaching out for connection, going to the library, looking something up online. Like, all of that takes the frontal lobes, right? And in fight, flight, freeze, the frontal lobes go dim for very good reason. And so these kinds of disorders greatly impact our sense of capacity as entrepreneurs, especially without um, systems or structure in place that we can kind of lean on. We have to make that ourselves with a crocodile brain. That's a hard thing to do. But what I really want to encourage people to do, or rather discourage people, is don't internalize that. The fight, flight, freeze response is a healthy response, and we're all here because of it. Okay, it's just gotten out of your control. It's hijacked you, but it's not a dangerous thing. It's not a bad thing. You're not a failure. You haven't done anything wrong. Your body's just anchored to a reality that's no longer happening, right? But your brain doesn't know that yet, and so that's how it can affect. And then, of course, that's what happens to our modern day humans. This is an ancient response that affects modern day humans. And so modern day humans, the bear can be, I can't pay my mortgage, I can't pay my rent, I don't have food for groceries. Like, that is the modern day bear, and that also triggers the fight, flight, freeze response.
Do you feel like for somebody who has PTSD, anxiety disorders, trauma, I'm just going to put those all
Sure,
under
sure,
like one umbrella right
sure,
now.
sure.
Do you feel like if they are on this journey of building a business and they have that response, that bear side of them gets triggered, do you feel like, because in my experience in the past, like I'll stay there, I'll like get
Mm-hmm.
stuck, and
Yes,
it's like, oh, I can't like fucking get out of this. Like, what
correct.
the fuck?
Yep.
So how long? Like how like can people stay there for like how long can people stay there?
That's a great question. So a healthy fight, flight, freeze response takes about 20 minutes to downregulate. Okay. So as soon as something gets and your heart starts to pound, as soon as that pings, you 20 minutes to down regulate all the way back to baseline. Right. But if we misunderstand this response, guess what? We get afraid. When we get afraid, it's another 20 minutes. And so people can stay in a fight, flight, freeze reaction state for a long time. And that's part of what's a disorder about it. It's meant to come and go and come and go. It's exactly the stuckness, Sophia, that you're talking about that separates regular fight, flight, freeze, fight, flight, freeze, healthy reactions. It distinguishes that from like PTSD and anxiety in that it comes, but it doesn't go. And then when it doesn't go, we start to freak out. And when we freak out, it just maintains the condition, right? And so the first thing we want to do is go, oh, this is normal. This is going to pass. I'm okay. This is just my body doing what my body does to keep me safe. There's nothing dangerous in this response. I'm not a failure or a loser. This is going to calm down. I'm going to take some deep breaths through my nose. Look around. Don't always look around. I'm safe here right now. These feelings will pass. And this is not personal. This is nothing bad about me, that my ancient ancestors gave me this gift to keep me alive and safe because it worked for them. So you really want to use positive or even soothing, more than positive, soothing self-talk to, again, ground you in the here and now, help you go, oh, what's happening to me? Oh, I'm having a fight, flight, freeze response. Oh, that's right. I must have registered that something was dangerous. Is anything dangerous? No, I'm okay. All right, so I'm going to breathe and I'm going to wait this out. And while I'm waiting this out, I'm not going to expect to be very productive. So I might get up, get a cup of tea, go for a little walk, shake it off. But like, I'm not going to sit here and go, oh my God, I can't think. Oh my God, this is that. Because all of that just escalates the fight, flight, freeze response and maintains us in bear brain or lizard
Mm,
brain. You got it.
mm,
You got
mm.
it.
Because that's something so powerful about like, like just kind of imitating the self-talk of like, oh, I'm a failure. Can self-talk like that? And I think for a lot of people it's below our conscious awareness. Like we're not always like for me, it's
For
like
sure.
I'm afraid I'm gonna like one of my fears is like if I don't make this work, like I'm gonna have to fucking move back home.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that means like then underneath that is like I'm a failure.
Mhm.
Can self-talk like that and like fears like that, can that also trigger the fight, flight, freeze response?
100%. That's what triggers it in modern day humans. In fact, so
Yeah.
there is a very powerful brain body connection as it relates to the sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze response, for very good reason. Our ancestors who could think lion before they saw the lion and get their body ready to fight the lion before the lion was present, they did better. So now we descend a million years from people who think danger, body gets ready. So when you start to think thoughts like, oh, this is going to be bad, body goes, oh shit, let's go. I'm ready. So that's the cute thing. Your body's only here to support you. You sent out the bat signal and your body showed up. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, fuck, what's Batman doing here? Like, must be bad. Like, like, no, we call Batman. That's why Batman's here, right? And this is the sweetest thing of all. And this is also what's annoying. Is like, your body will never let you down. You call lion, body shows up. You could be exhausted. You could do this for 20 years and you shout lion, body shows up. Okay. And in our modern day stressors, it shows up in the form of thoughts. Shoot, something's wrong with me. Somebody's going to reject me. I'm not going to be able to make my rent. Also, what you said, sweetie, is so interesting and so funny. We go to such all or nothing thoughts. There is nowhere in the world that it's written in stone that if whatever doesn't work out, you have to move home.
Yeah.
You don't have to move on. Like, you might, but you don't know what the future holds. So that's another thing with anxiety. This is really sweet. Anxiety is future focused. So people with depression tend to be past focused. And when we look back at the past and can't do anything about it and we collect all of our regrets, we get depressed.
Yeah.
People with anxiety are very future focused. So this isn't going to work. That's not going to work. I'm going to have to move home. This is going to be bad. And so I just invite people to stay more present than that and remind themselves, like, one, it's not all or nothing. And two, like, we don't know what the future holds.
Why do you feel, because it's interesting for me because I have like a very, very deep spiritual practice and like working on developing faith, but like in the past, and it's still something that comes up sometimes for me, there's almost like this mistrust in the future. And I feel like that's kind of like what anxiety is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
we don't trust the future. We don't trust that we're going to be safe and taken care of. But it's weird because it's like almost at a body somatic
Mm-hmm.
level, like not just like a thought level, like
Mm-hmm.
not just like I'm gonna think positive, I'm gonna think positive, I'm gonna think positive. Why is that? Why is there this inherent mistrust in the future for people that are struggling with anxiety, PTSD, and trauma?
Well, first of all, maybe because there's some kind of mistrust that's generated in the past, right? That's where it starts. I mean, if you come from a very stable, very loving, very predictable household, your nervous system is set to trust that everything's going to be fine, right? So what's happening in the present is often informed much by what happened in the past. And so if you came from an uncertain background, you weren't sure if you were going to get your needs met, that creates a base imprint of mistrust in your environment, in your caregivers, in the world around you. And so then you go out and you have all this much more agency, right? You can take care of yourself now, and you're not trapped and you're not under those kinds of circumstances. But your sweet little nervous system, like, shit, we don't know about this. Because in my past tells me it's not safe. And so in the present, I'm learning, but I'm like, so that's one major reason. Another major reason is that it's selected by nature. It must have been more advantageous to not trust the future. That must have helped our ancestors more than just be like, it's going to be fine. We'll have a harvest. We won't plant. We'll just have a harvest. It's going to be great. Like, that's all our ancient ancestors did, was mistrust the future. You know what I mean? They're like putting meat stores away, and they're farming, and they're gathering grains and putting them in silos because they don't trust tomorrow. Like, that's and so there's faith and mistrust that happen simultaneously, right? Like, I'm going to
Yeah,
plant
yeah,
these
yeah.
seeds and have faith that they will grow, and I'm going to harvest them, and I'm going to keep a stockpile because I don't trust that it will happen again.
Yeah.
And so there's like a both and, right? Some of it's just very natural and informed by natural selection, and some of it comes from our own histories of chaos and mistrust. And this is what's important. I love to tell people this: the best predictor of the future is the past. So if you're sitting at something and you've done this, you are successful in your business, and you reach something new in your business, and you go, oh, I don't think I got this. It's like, well, look back at what you've done in your business. Have you gotten this before? Have you done this before? Like, anxiety loves to give us amnesia. Anxiety loves to give us amnesia. It loves to make us
Oh,
forget that we just fucking did this. I love this. So I think of it like when I was in college, I was an oceanography major. It's not fucking amazing. I was an oceanography major.
stop! No way!
I
Seriously?
love an
Oh
oceanography
my God,
major.
I love that.
And I went on my first ocean excursion with the group, with the class. And it was in Humboldt State, go Humboldt, right? And then it was a 19-foot swells that day. I don't know if you've ever seen a 19-foot swell, but it basically looks like a tsunami from a boat. Like, when you're looking at the boat, looking up, you're like, oh my God, we're going to die, right? So the first one came, and I'm like, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I grew up in Southern California. Like, are we going to duck dive under this? I mean, how are we going to do this? Like, and the boat just went up, 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 crash. And I was like, oh. And then another water wall came, and I had forgotten what just happened. I'm like, what's going to happen? It's like, and for fucking 2 hours, every wave, I'm like, hold on, girl, we just did this. Okay, so anxiety really helps us forget that we've done this before, that we've mastered this before, that we're capable. It's like it all goes out the window, and we're just like, right here, right now, what are we going to do? But it's like, we've done this before. So try to remember that you've done this before, and you've had this before. And the best this is a great question. What is the percentage of trials, of challenges, of stressors you have made it through at this time in your life? What's the percentage that you've succeeded?
100%.
You got it. You got it. We don't remember that. So
Yeah.
self-talk plays a huge role in turning on our fight, flight, freeze response. It can also play a huge role in down-regulating the fight, flight, freeze response.
But I'm curious because like I'm very aware of my internal dialogue. Like I'm
Good.
like, oh, I'm thinking like I'm afraid of this. Blah, blah, blah. But sometimes for me, and I can only like I'll use myself as an example. Um, it's almost like I'm constantly fighting my internal narrative. It's like, no, 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 like I can fucking do this. Like I can fucking do this. Is that normal? Like, does it ever get to a point where it's just like relaxed? Because I feel like there's a lot of like trying to change what's actually going on and like fighting it and being like, no, like I have this, I have this, but there's almost like this sense of like constant fighting within that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, that would be the difference between, someone with anxiety and someone who's just having a stressful moment. It's like the stickiness
Yeah,
of it, the way that it kind of
yeah, yeah.
sticks. Yeah, that's kind of the difference. Like, those of us without anxiety disorders, we have lapses or moments, or we get stressed out, but it doesn't completely galvanize, and it doesn't feel like a constant fight. Like PTSD, anxiety, those do feel like a constant battle. And that's why it's exhausting to walk around in these states, and that the brain is kind of in this hyper vigilant, essentially hyper vigilant state. The sweet thing is, it's just trying to keep us safe. Like, this terrible part of ourselves that we can't stand is just a part of ourselves that's trying to keep us safe, trying to keep us fed, trying to keep us loved. It just does it in a way that's uncomfortable and unproductive. So I like to even just give a shout out to it instead of always trying to bash it, get rid of it, belittle it, hate it. It's like, how can we better support this part of ourselves? How can we hear from it? So when I hear stuff like that, I go, oh, sweetie, you're scared. Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
And I acknowledge that. There's a wonderful exercise. I'll share it here right now. It's called Breathe, Validate, Accept. This one is not one I created, but it's one I use, and I cannot remember who the author is, but it's a really great, very quick intervention. So first what you do is, it's called Breathe, Validate, Accept. So first you take a deep breath. When you're anxious, you just take a deep breath. And in that, you just notice what you're feeling. So the breath phase is just stop and take a breath and notice what you're feeling. So you might say to yourself, okay, take a breath. I'm feeling anxious. Okay. And then you think about what's going on in your life and what you're doing right now. And you say to yourself, of course I'm feeling anxious. I've got all this going on. And then you say, and that's okay. Right. So instead of fighting it, we acknowledge it and we make space for it. We go, oh, I'm feeling anxious. Of course I'm feeling anxious. And that's okay. I'm overwhelmed. And every time we do the validation stuff with my patients, when they think about what's going on, they start cracking up. They're like, of course I'm overwhelmed. Like, look at this. I'm like, yeah, what else would you be? Right? So just this normalizing, instead of just like, shut the fuck up. I don't want to listen to you. Why are you still here? Go away. I can't stand you. I'm going to get rid of you. It's like, just like, let's acknowledge that this is like knocking at our door, essentially. And so instead, like, well, we don't answer the door and we want the person to go away. It's like, or you can just answer the door. Like, what do you need? Can I help you? And then they stop knocking. So I like to tell people to acknowledge what's happening instead of, what I mean? It's like, no, open the fucking door and find out who's there, right? And then maybe they go away after that. And these are practices, and we may have to practice them over and over. This is really interesting. Neurons that fire together wire together. The more we do something cognitively or anything, the better we get at it. So if you worry and tell yourself scary stories, brains don't care what, brains care that. Brains do not care what we are doing. They only care that we are doing it. Brains do not care if it's French or German or English. If you're doing French, your brain will get very good at French. If you're doing German, your brain will get very good at German. They did this really interesting study with MRIs where they took people with different vocations and they scanned their brains. And then what they found was they scanned musicians, linguists, and taxi cab drivers in New York. And what they found was that people who specialized in language, that part of their brain was 3 times thicker than people who did not specialize in language. People who drove taxi cabs, visual spatial mapping was 3 times thicker in their brain. The cortex was 3 times thicker than people who do not drive taxi cabs. Same with musicians. People who are musicians, the part of their brain involved in music was 3 times thicker than people who are not involved in music. So brains don't care what, brains care that. So if you have a brain that's highly specialized in worry and scary stories, your brain goes, oh, we're going to get really efficient at that. So those will fire so automatically. So it does get hard to get a handle on at some point because the brain has been wired and fired for years around these scary, scary stories. So they become like super highways in our brain where those pathways just, they fire off so fast and without a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's meant to be like, what's the word I want to say? It's meant to be like, something that is resource, maintaining. Like I don't waste all my resources. It's supposed to be efficient. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Brains love efficiency. Brains
Yeah.
love efficiency. They go, oh, Sophia's going to have thoughts about how terrible she is. Watch how fast we can make those go without a lot of effort or thought. And so the brain gets, and it's so cute because the brain's like, look, we did it. Like we made a super highway. Yeah, but it goes right to the crocodile pond. Like we don't want to take that road, right? But the brain's like, how cool. We made that happen fast and without any effort. Like, thanks, brain. So cute.
So interesting.
So,
I love the spin you put on it. It's so fun. It's so cool. And it's interesting too, because in our modern day, we just have so much stimulation all the time. It's
I
like
know.
constant stimulation, constant like things grabbing our attention. I almost feel like, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
oh, baby, I could talk to you all day about this
Same,
stuff.
same, same,
Oh my
same, same,
God.
same, same.
There's so much, and I love your wealth of knowledge,
Thank you.
and I love the energy that you bring to it. Like you bring this fun, playful energy, which I think is so
Yeah.
important because like it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be like, I don't know, I think a lot of people, and I guess again, I'll speak from my own experience. I don't like when people project shit onto me. So I'm like, I'm gonna speak from my experience. Like having even fear of our own trauma and fear of our own anxiety. And I love just the light-hearted playful energy that you bring to it. Like, it's okay. Like, you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Your body's doing exactly what it's
Yep.
supposed to. And just loving ourselves on that journey. Last question I want to ask you, and then I want to ask you about some of the stuff you're working on and how people can reach you. What do you feel like the relationship is between overcoming trauma, anxiety, PTSD, and self-love?
What do I think the connection is between those things?
Yeah.
I mean, they're inextricably linked. First of all, your nervous system is your life, right? If your nervous system is settled, you're settled. If your nervous system is not settled, you're not settled, right? And then that plays into self concept, that plays into self love, that plays into self hatred. Self love can calm the nervous system. It's all kind of like a biofeedback loop, right? These are all feedback loops. And so the softer I am with myself, the more I soothe myself, the more my nervous system calms, the more I tell myself inflammatory, scary, terrifying stories, the more my nervous system amps up, the more I hate myself, the more my future just seems to be all or nothing, pass, fail. That affects my motivation, that affects my capacity, that affects my attention and concentration. And so I mean, for me, ultimately, it's always about self love. Like, I do all of this to bring us back to wholeness within ourselves, to restore our relationship, to have a safe place within us where we can feel good and belong to ourselves and under our own control. And anxiety is not bad. That's what I'm here to say. Like, we're all here because of anxiety. We're all here because of anxiety. If we did not have anxiety, we would not be here. The fight, flight, freeze response is older than humans. The dinosaurs had it. Like, everybody's got it. So, like, we need this thing. So we want to befriend this thing and understand how to harness it. Instead of letting it ride us around, we learn how to ride it around. But there's no getting rid of it. There's only two things we could do. We could kill you or give you a lobotomy. And I don't offer those treatments. Unfortunately, those are not ones I specialize in. So we want to befriend these aspects of self because they are not going anywhere and they are not bad. And so that, and again, that's why I think I do take a lighthearted approach, because this stuff is great. It's great. It's just misunderstood. And so I like to come with like a sign of hope and positivity, and this can be done, and all of this makes sense if you understand the science. And that's another reason why I think it's cool to work with a licensed professional who has experience, is because we know the science. So we can sit with you and help. The first step in any intervention for anxiety, PTSD, or otherwise is education. The OCD, education. The first thing we do is educate you to help you. And that in of itself starts to reset the nervous system. Oh, nothing dangerous is happening. Oh, this is normal. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not a failure. And maybe these messages aren't exactly true as I hear them. So I think that they all are just connected, and they all affect us in major and important ways.
Mm. It's so beautiful. I
Yeah,
love that.
me too.
I love that.
Me too.
So, can you tell us about your membership?
Sure, yes. So I just launched, I'm launching a membership on October 3rd. It's a soft launch now. And it is a monthly membership where you get access. So I do online courses like webinars, and I go into all kinds of stuff. And I've got 4 so far. They're all wonderful. I've got one on codependency. It's a masterpiece. The codependency webinar is a masterpiece. I've got one on boundaries, which is amazing, and it really supports the codependency webinar. I've got one on stress where I go into everything fight, flight, freeze. So it's called Chill, Baby. Don't stress about stress, because we don't need to stress about stress. And many of us are stressing about being stressed. Not effective. So I've got one for you there. So if the things you heard today feel like there's something you want to learn much more about or do a much deeper dive, that one's there for people to understand the sympathetic nervous system and all these. And it's got, all of them have wonderful tools in them as well. I'm full of tools. I'm here to help us do something different, right? And then the one I just produced is on forgiveness. Being unforgiving with ourselves and others can be very stressful and very anxiety provoking and take up a lot of our head and heart space. So my membership gives you access to all of those. Plus, I'll be producing new webinars very regularly, about every month. So my next one is going to be on self-love and self-compassion. The one after that's probably going to be on OCD. Then I want to do one on PTSD. Then I want to do one on narcissism, and the list goes on. I want to do one on neurodivergence. Like, I want to do one on everything. So that's going to be coming out as we go. So you get access to that in the membership. You also get lives with me. So when you log into my Mighty Network and you become a member, I'm going to do bi-monthly lives at the very least. I might go on more than that, where you get to ask me direct questions about your specific experiences. I think that that's kind of that's missing in my webinars. People will have all these great questions after my webinar, but no way to access me. So if you buy the webinar, you'll get all this great information. But if you join the membership, then you'll get to really engage with me around the material, right?
Is that twice a month that you go live in there?
Yeah. twice a month.
Twice a month?
Yeah,
Cool. Love
yeah,
that. So
exactly.
cool.
Yeah. And then the last component that's really special is a supportive community of like-minded people who are on a similar journey, who are learning from the same perspectives. Right? It's so cool when you're in a codependency recovery journey to talk to other people who are on a codependency recovery journey and really understand what that means. Codependency is desperately misunderstood. People think it's, oh, I can't be alone. That has nothing to do with it. People can not want to be alone and not be codependent. So having other people who are on the journey with you, using the language you're using, trying to come out with the gains you're trying to come out with. And this is a safe community. It's something that not anybody can just get in and troll, right? These are members, and we're all a part of this healing safe haven. And so that's what the membership is. And it's going live on the 3rd. There's a soft launch now. And so we're just trying to get folks to come on in and be a part of the community.
Yay. Oh my gosh, that's
Ah,
so exciting.
thank
And
you.
where can they access
Oh,
that?
that's a great question. So on my Instagram page, you can find it in my link in my bio. It's also on my website under courses. And again, you can buy a webinar one-off, or you can get the membership. You'll have access to all the webinars and the growing library and me and the community. And so you can access that on my website under courses.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Wow. And how
Yeah.
much is it?
It's $99 a month, and that includes all the
That's
webinars.
it?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. And access to me and the community.
Yeah,
Yeah. And if you
that sounds
join, you
amazing.
should expect to find tremendous relief from anxiety, self-hatred, codependency, boundary struggles, a lot of support with relationships with difficult people, relationships with spouses and children. You should feel a whole lot better.
Mm, so cool. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah,
That
then you
sounds
can become your own
amazing.
safe place. That's the whole vibe, right?
So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much, BP,
Thanks for
Dr.
having me. This
B.
was so
Yes,
cool. Yeah. Thank you
so
so much for
cool.
having me. Yeah.
You're welcome. Love you
I
so much. Thank
love
you
you so
for
much
all your
too.
wisdom, and yeah, I'm excited to share this with
Me
the
too,
world.
baby. Thank you. I love you. Mwah.
Love
Y'all
you
go
too.
heal. You can heal. You can heal. You can heal. Love
Love it. All right.
you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye, everyone.